By the age of 65, the outstanding scientist had only a mind, a pair of weakly working fingers, eyesight, and hearing. The skeletal body is hidden under clothes. From a distance, it can be mistaken for a shapeless pile of clothes thrown on a wheelchair. The uninitiated are shocked when they suddenly discern a generous smile in a mess of fabrics. Professor Dowell's head. When the science fiction writer A. Belyaev wrote his story, Professor Hawking had not yet been born. He was born on the day of the 300th anniversary of Galileo's death, which he likes to mention in interviews, hinting at continuity. They also share an interest in space. However, contemporaries claim that Hawking is the heir of Newton. He headed the same department at Cambridge, and Einstein. No wonder in the movie Star Wars, the scientist played a cameo role in Factgo Yourself, playing cards with the above-mentioned great minds and humanoid robots. Hawking is indeed a genius, without any reservations. He is the only person who is closest to unraveling the universe and the structure of the universe. This is recognized by scientists all over the world. He does not have a Nobel Prize, only because he first made a discovery that was included in the textbooks of all universities, and then just as easily refuted it. And ordinary people who were not confused by science. In 1988, he wrote a bestseller without a single mathematical formula, A Brief History of Time. A book it has sold millions of copies and has been translated into 33 languages. In parallel, Hawking released the same book with formulas for colleagues. He was probably born a genius, although neither Oxford nor Cambridge noticed his talent. Genius manifested itself only after illness. In an interview, Stephen Hawking said, "I'm definitely happier now. Before the diagnosis, life seemed boring to me, but the prospect of dying early made me realize that life is worth living." Stephen was born healthy. At the age of 13, he decided that he would be an astrophysicist. He was raised in a family of Oxford graduates, so the scientific path was predetermined, and consistently went into scientific circles. When he started stumbling out of the blue at the age of 21 and went to the doctors, they told him to drink less beer. The second appeal, Stephen fell down the stairs of the dormitory, ended with a verdict. He had 2-2.5 years to live. The diagnosis is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This means that the body will lose muscle mass at an accelerated rate to complete paralysis, speech disorders, and swallowing. The disease is considered incurable and, as a rule, leads to sudden death. All the doctors could advise was to drink vitamins. How does a young man feel when he finds out about his imminent death at the age of 21? The first thing Stephen thought about was his doctoral thesis. What's the point of protecting her now? So that parents can write on the tombstone, "The candidate of sciences rests here." But Hawking surprisingly quickly overcame mental impotence. He himself connects the resurrection with the engagement. If he has a family, then it needs to be provided for, and for this it is necessary to get a place, which will be given only after defending a dissertation. And Stephen began to work at full strength. Who was his chosen one? Shortly before his illness, he met Jane. She somehow found out the diagnosis earlier and still responded to the marriage proposal with consent. Because she loved me. There are no other explanations for this woman's stately feat. The chronology of their family life is closely intertwined with the history of Hawking's illness. He came to his wedding in 1965 leaning on a stick. The following year, he defended his thesis. A year later, the first son was born. Dad walked on crutches. In 1970, his daughter was born. He moved in a wheelchair. Since 1974, Hawking could no longer self. It was difficult to sit and get up. Jane took care of him and the two children. Sometimes students helped with food and special treatment. In 1977, Hawking was awarded a professorship. 2 years later, the third, youngest son was born. At the same time, Dad became a Lucas Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge, like Newton. Starting in 1980, Jane was forced to hire nurses to help her, who came for a couple of hours a day. In 1985, Hawking suffered severe pneumonia, had a tracheotomy, and the professor was permanently unable to speak. Now he needed the round-the-clock care of nurses and nurses. The enforced silence prompted him to write. In 1988, Hawking published his famous book, A Brief History of Time, which brought him worldwide fame. In 1992, it was filmed. But he was promised only 2 years of life. Where did this string of dates come from? The medicine has a name, Jane. She wasn't just looking after Stephen. She brought up character and self-respect in him. There are eyewitness accounts of how Jane insisted that her husband, who could no longer walk, climbed the stairs to the second floor of their house using only the strength of his still alive hands. It was a hard sight, but what a hero Stephen felt at the top of the stairs. When guests came to them, Jane could approach her thoughtful husband and quietly tell him, "Straighten up and smile at people. Talk to them. No one knows that you're thinking about physics right now and having a great time. All they see is a hunched figure." And Stephen obeyed her. In her memoirs, Jane described her husband as a tyrant with the body of a Holocaust victim and the needs of a child. She felt more like a mother than a wife. At other times, Jane was close to suicide. She was stopped only by the thought of children and her main child, her husband. "I couldn't walk away and leave Stephen. Burning coals would have rained down on my head." These details became known many years after their divorce. No one believed that such a thing was possible. They had lived together for 26 years. Yes, it wasn't easy for Jane, especially when she and her husband were arguing about God. Hawking denied divine origin. Jane accused him of religious incompetence and could not understand why Stephen was so stubborn, because only faith helped her decide to fight her husband's illness, endure, and win this battle for decades. But the real reason for the divorce was not ideological differences. It wasn't Jane who left Stephen, but he went to another one. Poor health once again led Hawking to a hospital bed. He was in a coma for several days. Nurses were constantly on duty nearby. Among them was Elaine Mason. Already at the hospital, the staff noticed that Stephen and Elaine had a warmer relationship than the patient and the nurse. At first, they did not pay attention. Hawking has always been a womanizer. No wonder there are 2 portraits in his office: Einstein behind his back and Marilyn Monroe in front of his eyes, as 2 poles of his interests. The seriousness of their relationship was realized only after the divorce. Jane and Stephen officially broke up in 1990, and the wedding with Elaine took place in 1995. Both decided to leave their spouses and settle separately for Christmas. Elaine left 2 children, Stephen left 3. Both families were in shock. The tragic nature of the situation was that Hawking's wheelchair got stuck in the snow when he was leaving his family. I helped him. Elaine's ex-husband is David Mason, who a little earlier designed a computer with a portable speech synthesizer for the genius, allowing Hawking to talk, write books, lecture, make reports, including in the White House. David Mason rolled the chair to the hotel, where Elaine was waiting for her lover. Jane soon married her old musician friend. It seems that all the worries are left behind. But the relationship between the 2 families cannot be called friendly, although the first wife, children, and 200 other guests came to congratulate the scientist on his 60th birthday. The press noted the friendliness that prevailed between members of both families, but no one knows what really happened there. There are 2 cases of attempted murder of Hawking at the police station. Once he was found by a stranger in the yard of a house in an overturned stroller. The scientist lay there for a long time and got heat stroke. It is unclear where Elaine and the nurses were and how a stranger could get into private ownership. Another case is related to cuts and beatings inflicted on a scientist by an unknown person. Hawking refused to give a name. Was he afraid of hurting someone close to him? A version about a maniac was invented for the public. Family secrets are as mysterious as the secrets of the universe, and only Hawking knew the answer to each of them. The 65-year-old scientist had the courage to express a desire to fly into space, and the director of Virgin Galactic promised to personally finance his flight. Do you think it's PR? Hawking has already participated in the preparatory flight and experienced the state of weightlessness 8 times. He had a team of doctors with him who stated surprisingly good medical indicators. Where Hawking is, everything is possible. No wonder, he said. Do you know what's most important? To consider as possible what seems fantastic. Stephen Hawking lived 76 years. He died on March 14, 2018 at his home in Cambridge, surrounded by family and friends. The scientist's ashes were buried on the territory of Westminster Abbey, between the graves of Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin.